talk about in my speech are a few things. Firstly, I want to look again at which groups you're affecting and how you're affecting them in different ways. We think OG has been quite simplistic in lumping them all in one big group and saying everyone is going to have maximum options and this is great for everyone under PROP. Secondly, I want to look at this racist backlash and whether it's going to happen, why we think it happens more under the opposition, under the proposition than it does at the moment. And thirdly, I want to look at why, just look at this idea that the state is not static, right? And we think that the proposition is making it more static through the measures that they're pursuing, something that has been underpinning as an assumption their entire case when they say that if you don't like it, if you don't buy into it, just leave, right? Just go somewhere else. But before that, just a quick thing about this permanence idea. It became you can come back, we're just saying we're not going to fund people to go on holidays. Fine, this is the weakest, biggest, cop out from what the motion says. I assume emigrate without the word permanent emigrate still means that you're not going on holiday, but fine, let's go with what, even under what they're saying. We think that you still, and they concede this, it's still hard to move back. It's still a massive decision that, that it can ultimately keep you locked in somewhere else. It also assumes that the state is going to take you back. What if you choose to come back? We think that that's not fair, right? You've left behind the analysis you hear from Scott, you've left behind family, circumstances change over the course of your lifetime, and we think that you should have a natural right to be able to go back to that, not making it incredibly hard as they're talking about. Even under there, you can go back whenever you want to. This becomes even harder, especially if society changes in the ways that Scott already discussed, in terms of it becoming less accepting of these people, in terms of them saying, you chose to leave because you don't buy into our social contracts, you don't agree with our state, and so on and so forth, right? So we think that this is weak, but fine, let's go with it. Which groups are you affecting, right? The opening government just goes with those who can't afford to move on their own. We think that this actually breaks down in a few different categories. First of all, the most vulnerable group in a society who they don't talk about, if what they care about is maximizing choices, the group that is most affected, right, is the group that doesn't have choices and doesn't have good conditions in their own country, but also doesn't necessarily have the skills to find employment elsewhere. The proposition can only claim that they're affecting and helping everyone in society if everyone has some other state that is willing to take them in, right? Else you're not benefiting everyone. No, thank you. You're just locking these people in a system that actually becomes progressively worse according to what we've already talked about and what I'm going to talk about more. So they're not improving it for all, as they claim and they assert in the first speech. But second, even those who can move and will find a country to emigrate to, and they consider this, they won't necessarily, they assume that they're going to have a choice of where to go, right? And we don't think that that choice is completely unlimited. We're fine with this under both sides, but we don't think that you can present this as them going and saying, this is the paradise for me, I'm going to move there, right? Especially when they concede things like, oh, we're okay with them moving to liberal states. They assume, again, that this is done based on choice, right? That I chose to move to the state. When the reality might be that the only place where my skills are worth taking is if I am, say, the Indian worker who is now migrating to Qatar, for example, to work there. It doesn't mean that I'm making a free choice to do that. I am going to a place where my life is going to be significantly worse. No, thank you. This is not just about French women moving from, French Muslim women moving from France to the UK, right? Because the UK might just not take you. So we don't think that these groups are based on the kind of choice that the proposition has been talking about. Thirdly, we think that there are those, let's take them at the best, who are going to pick the ideal destination for them and go to the place that they want to, right? We still don't think that this proves that they have made a completely free choice to go in terms of staying. They can make a choice of where to go. It doesn't mean that they chose it freely and openly in terms of staying in their own country. Why? Because we think that, again, they are, it's not a rejection of their home state, especially in the kind of analysis that we get by the first speaker about social contracts and the values of the state. It might just be a short-term decision out of desperation and out of need. The problem here, right, is that the fact is that, again, they ignore the analysis that you hear from Scott, that the state itself, if this liberal state that has caused them to be in that kind of short-term desperation has failed these people, it has failed them, no thank you, by not creating the conditions that would enable these people to have a properly free choice if they want to emigrate, by having the money to access legal help, by having the money to pay for flights, right? So what you actually should be doing if you want to help these people is create conditions within the society economically that allow them to properly make this free choice, no thank you, not by giving them the aid at the end, because again this is premised on the idea that these people, you're telling these people that if you can't go, and you're lumping all of them together, whether it's out of economic need, values, whatever else, no thank you, that if you don't like things here, just leave, right? We think this is problematic, especially when you create a situation where the state now assumes that if you stay, it means that you're necessarily buying into all of the values that the state has and you like the conditions there. No, thank you. In terms of the racist backlash, right, and this is quite brief, they said that this happens anyway, this a Daily Mail already exists. A few problems here, right? First of all, that now at least it's not focused on the idea that if you don't like it, just go, right? To the extent, no, thank you, that it's not just the Daily Mail saying it, but the state making it official policy that what you do when you don't like things here is leave. The kind of facilitation, active facilitation that happens under POP means that now the state is aligning itself with the kind of Daily Mail rhetoric. We also think that this is kind of this idea of the opt-in system versus the opt-out system is kind of doesn't sit very well with this idea of the social contract and the idea that if I'm staying because I'm choosing to abide by all of the values of the state, if they're actually seeing this as an option for people to just basically survive. So what does the state look like under the proposition? Why is it not static now, and that's an assumption, but they make it static under their side? Before that, yes.
So we don't quite understand the point of Kallina's first argument, because we don't need to prove to you that it is an entirely free choice, just one that is comparatively more free than one where you're physically held back by economic constraints.
No. What you need to prove is that if a liberal state is depriving you of the opportunities to thrive in your life and have a good life and a meaningful life there, this is the best way for them to facilitate that, right? You have the responsibility in the first speech about the state creating these options and making people's lives better, and you need to argue, especially since we're giving you analysis as to why this is going to make things worse, why this is the best way for the state to create these choices. We're not opposed to people having choices. Why doesn't it do this, right? Because the proposition assumes that the state doesn't change. France has a burqa ban, France will also always have a burqa ban, and they claim that it's basically if you don't like this, you're inconsistent with the values of the state, leave, go somewhere else where it's more, where you're more consistent. What they're arguing for is not social solidarity as they claim, right? It's a completely uniform state where people don't have opposing views, where people don't push for change and stay within France and expect France to potentially change and have or not have a burqa ban, become more like the UK or not, depending on what happens, right? They just say if you disagree with this, it means you're not buying into the social contract, leave. We think that this is basically not something that facilitates choice, nor is the healthy relationship with the state. We think you make things worse and achieve less change onto their side when you reduce the voter bloc that disagrees with the state, because now they're just told to leave, and when they're perceived by others as being an illegitimate voice who rejects the state as in its entirety, as opposed to rejecting specific policies of the state that they would like to push for change. We think you don't get change, you get stagnation under the proposition instead of the potential for social progress that you have at the moment, and for that we oppose.